You know, in the world of engineering, there are projects and then there are legends. Projects so huge, so unbelievably ambitious, they feel almost mythical. Today, we're tackling one of those, the Gothard Base Tunnel. Think of it as the Mount Everest of construction.
So, this really is the central question, isn't it? The whole story, this entire incredible feat, it all comes down to this. We're not just talking about digging a hole. No, this was a 17-year-long war between some of the smartest people on the planet and the raw, brutal power of a mountain that did not want to be drilled through.
All right, let's set the stage. Forever, the Alps have been this beautiful but brutal barrier right in the heart of Europe. I mean, they're gorgeous, right? But they're also a massive wall of rock and ice that basically slice the continent in half, a total bottleneck for anyone trying to move goods or people. And this really shows you what they were up against. For generations, your only choice was to go over the mountains. Think slow, winding, dangerous roads. Roads that could be shut down for months because of snow, or even worse, deadly avalanches. As Europe's economy started booming, this just wasn't going to cut it anymore. They had to find a better way, and the only way was straight through. So they came up with a plan. But this wasn't just any plan to dig a tunnel. No, this was something else entirely, something people had called impossible for decades. The idea? Forget the peaks. Don't even try to go near them. Let's drill straight through the very base of the Alps.
And when they proposed this, the experts, the leading engineers from all over the world, pretty much laughed. They looked at the plans and just said, nope, impossible, can't be done. The risks were insane, the tech they needed hadn't been invented, and honestly, the mountain was just seen as being way too powerful. And I mean, you can see why they were doubters, right? Look at these numbers. They were aiming for the world's longest tunnel, 57 kilometers, and the world's deepest, digging 2.5 kilometers straight down below the peaks. And get this, two teams, one starting from the north, one from the south, were supposed to drill for 17 years and meet perfectly in the middle. The margin for error? Basically zero. Absolutely nuts. But here's the thing. The enemy here wasn't just rock and dirt. Oh no. Deep inside that mountain, it was like the earth itself was fighting back. The engineers had to face three, let's call them villains, three terrifying forces of nature, and any one of them could have ended the whole project. First up, the sheer crushing weight. We're talking 2.5 kilometers of solid rock sitting on top of you. The pressure was so intense, it could twist giant steel beams like they were made of tinfoil. It could cause rock to spontaneously explode outwards. They called them rock bursts, with zero warning. It was like the mountain was actively trying to squeeze the tunnel shut behind them as they dug. Then there was the heat. You go that deep into the earth and it gets hot, like really hot. We're talking 50 degrees Celsius. That's 122 Fahrenheit. It was literally an oven down there. Imagine trying to do heavy construction work in that. People could only work for maybe 15-20 minutes before they were at risk of heat stroke. It was a death trap. But the scariest thing of all, it was the water. And I'm not talking about a little drip. This was water that had been trapped inside the rock for thousands of years, under almost 3,000 psi of pressure. That's like a hydraulic press. If they hit one of these pockets, that water would explode out, blasting through solid concrete like a cannonball. Absolutely terrifying. So you've got crushing rock, suffocating heat, and explosive water. The odds seem impossible, right? But this is where the story gets incredible. The engineers didn't back down. They got clever. They started inventing brand new ways to fight back. Okay, so how do you solve the heat? It's pretty amazing. Before they could even really start digging, they basically had to air condition the mountain. They built this huge cooling system that pumped chilled water through miles of pipes, literally pulling the heat out of the rock to create a space where people could actually work without, collapsing. And what about that crushing pressure? Well, they figured out pretty quickly that you couldn't just build a thicker wall. The mountain would always win. So instead, they designed a flexible skeleton for the tunnel. They'd spray concrete, then install these massive steel rings that weren't totally rigid. They could actually bend and shift just a tiny bit, which allowed them to absorb the mountain's immense force instead of just shattering. Now, this next part is my favorite. It's just genius. To deal with that deadly high-pressure water, they decided to turn their worst enemy into their best friend. They'd drill a bunch of small pipes into the water-filled rock, then pump super cold liquid through them for weeks on end. And what happens? The whole section freezes solid into a giant wall of ice. Then the boring machine could just drill right through it, safe and sound. Brilliant. So after all these years, battling the heat, the pressure, the water, the project was finally reaching its make-or-break moment, the climax, the moment of truth when the two separate tunnels, digging for over a decade, were finally supposed to meet. And you can just imagine the tension on October 15th, 2010. This was the question. After 17 years of work, all that money, all that ingenuity, after drilling 57 kilometers through a mountain from opposite directions, did it work? Would they line up, or would they miss by a few feet? Two tunnels lost in the dark, forever separate. The stakes couldn't have been higher. And then, the breakthrough. The final wall of rock came down. And they did it. They absolutely nailed it. The two tunnels were off by less than half an inch. Half an inch. To do that, they used an incredible combination of GPS, lasers, and gyroscopes so precise they even had to factor in the curvature of the Earth. That level of accuracy over that distance, it's just unbelievable. So victory, right? The battle is won. Well, not quite. You'd think that would be the end of the story, but the engineers knew better. There was one last enemy they had to deal with, an invisible one that could destroy a train after the tunnel was finished. And that final enemy was the air itself. It's something called the piston effect. So picture this. A high-speed train flies into a long, skinny tunnel. It acts just like a piston in an engine, pushing a massive wall of compressed air in front of it. With nowhere to go, that air becomes a shockwave, one so powerful it could literally shatter the train's windows. But the engineers knew this was coming. The solution was part of the plan from day one. They didn't build one big tunnel. They built two separate, smaller tunnels, one for each direction, with crossover passages every so often. That way, the pressure wave has a place to escape. Problem solved. When you look at the whole thing, the Goddard Base Tunnel is just an incredible monument to what people can do when they put their minds to it. It's a story of perseverance. But, like a lot of these grand projects, that victory came at a very real human cost. Let's just take a second to let these numbers sink in. The cost, $12.5 billion. The time, 17 years. They had 2,600 people working on this, and they pulled out almost 30 million tons of rock. To put that in perspective, that's enough rock to build the Great Pyramid of Giza 5 times over. The scale is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around. But of all those staggering statistics, this is the one that matters most. 9 people tragically lost their lives during the construction. There's a memorial for them now right at the tunnel entrance. It's a powerful and solemn reminder that progress like this, conquering a mountain, it doesn't come for free. And that kind of leaves us with this final thought, right? The Gothard Base Tunnel was something the smartest people in the world called impossible. And now it's a reality that literally changed the map of Europe. So it really makes you wonder, what impossible things are we working on right now? What are the modern marvels being built today that future generations are going to look back on and just say, wow?